During this video about Adobe Experience Design, we are going to continue to talk about the vector shapes, and also we will talk mostly about the text, which in Adobe XD are also vectors. First of all, I wanted to let you see that with these shapes you can create masks. In fact, if we take an image from our folder, for example this castle image, and we drag it into the workspace of Adobe XD, we can put, for example, this rectangle above this image. We can scale a little bit the image, so we can create now a mask. Let's see how to do that. We will select our elements, so the image and the rectangle, and with the right side of our mouse we will click on Mask with Shape. Also we have the shortcuts. So now it has created a mask, and we can see that the image is now into the rectangle. So I wanted also to let you see that when you have a border with a color different from the inside color of your, in this case, rectangle, you can change the opacity of the filling, and you can change the opacity of the border individually, so one at a time, and you can change it in different ways. You can have a full opacity inside, and also you can have a little less on the border, but when you change the opacity from here, you will change the opacity of the border and of the filling in the same way during the same time. So we will now talk about the text, but during this video we will not work into this tutorial document. This is because into the assets we do not have any character styles saved. So I have already opened the wireframes web UI kit that we have downloaded in one of the previous videos. So you can search it in your folder if you have downloaded it, and you can also download it from the UI kits webpage of Adobe XD. So we are now into this document, and we can see that we have the colors saved into the assets. We have also a lot of character styles saved, and we have also a lot of components. So let's create, first of all, an artboard. So we can move it in a more free area, and we can zoom into the artboard with the zoom tool, or we can also go to the layers and click on this icon at the left side of the name of our artboard. So let's create a text. As we saw in the previous video, we can create text in two different ways, and we will have two different kind of text. In fact, we can click, so we can press and drag with the text tool activated, and we will create a text box. So we can write text box, or we can also click on the text tool, and we can just click in any point of the artboard or of the workspace, and in this case we will have an insertion. So as we saw in the previous video, the main difference between these two kind of texts is that when we have the text box and we enlarge it from these handles, it will enlarge the rectangle, the box of the text. And also, if we, for example, copy and paste this text here, and if we cover with the sides of the box, the text, it will not be anymore visible, and it will appear this red handle that will indicate to us that there is a text hidden. So, with the insertion, we do not have all of these handles. We only have one handle, and when we click on it and when we move our mouse, it will enlarge the text. So, of course, you can change the dimensions of the text from here. So we can click on here and we can, for example, write 60. Let's write, for example, 80. It has erased the text. Okay, now we have a really big text which does not fit into this text box. In fact, we have the red handle. So now we can, for example, copy this text with Ctrl+C and Ctrl+V, or also with Alt by clicking on our keyboard on Alt, and we can move this text into the artboard so that we will have it here. So we have some options to edit our text, but they are not the same that we have in other programs, like for example in Adobe InDesign we really can edit our text in a very different way. We can create a lot of different effects, a lot of different type of text, but in Adobe XD we have some tools to edit them, but we do not have a lot of choices like we have, for example, as I said, into Adobe XD. So, of course, as we know, a text into Adobe XD is a vector. So, of course, we can, with the text, create a grid. If we click on Repeat Grid, we can create a grid of our text. Of course, it works with the text box, but also with the insertion. So, let's go back with Ctrl+Z, and now let's see what kind of fonts we have. Another difference between Adobe XD and Adobe InDesign is that when we are searching for a font, we do not have the preview of the font in here. So we'll have to click on the font to see how it is like. But into Adobe XD, when we search for the font that we want, in here we will have a preview of it. So we will see how it is, the shape of the text, and if we like it or not. So we have a lot of fonts in here, but if you want to have other fonts, you can go, for example, on Google. So we can go on Google and search for free fonts. Free font download, for example, let's see this website. And from this website, we have some fonts that we can use for free, but we cannot use, for example, for a commercial purpose, like this font is free, but it is for personal use. We can also have some fonts that we will have to pay to get, but this Bebas Neue, for example, it is free, so we can click on download and it will open a zip. So we can click on the zip and we have a lot of types, a lot of text. So we can select these two, which are the file for the text, and we can extract them in our folder, or we can also click on them on these two texts. We can click on Ctrl+C and we can go to, if we have a Windows computer, we can go to Windows, go to the Windows folder, and then go to the Fonts folder, and we can click on Ctrl+V and it will install the font. So, of course, we can also select our font, extract them in our folder, click on OK, go to our folder. So we can search for our folder and search for our font, click on them, click with the right side of our mouse to show other options and click on install. I have already installed these fonts from the Windows folder, so I already have it, but you can also do it this way. So we can now go into Adobe XD and we can search for our font from here. So we can search the letter B, our font. You will have to remember the name of the font, which is Bebasneue, but we can also click on here and search for our font. So we have now the text with the font. Also, we have two options for this font. We can have the font in a regular way or in a bold way. And a lot of fonts have, for example, a lot of types of, for example, we can choose to have an italic font, a narrow bold font, a bold font. So we have a lot of options. So what we are going to do now is to save, for example, this font into the assets, and we can click onto this font and we can go to the assets and click on plus. And now we will have this font saved with the dimensions that we have here. So let's now see what we can do from the assets. So let's go on one of these artboards and let's see if there are some text saved into the assets. Probably these texts are made with the same character style. How can we see if this kind of character styles is saved into the text? We can double click onto the text and then by clicking with the right side of our mouse, we can go in here and if we see, like we see right now, reveal character style in assets, it will mean that the character style is saved and that we can reveal it. In fact, if we click on reveal character style in assets, we can see which character style it is. So, if this character style was not saved into the assets, we would have seen here add character style in assets. Also, as we can see from here, we can also add only the color of this character style into the assets. And of course, you can save both the color and both the whole character style. So let's add the color into the assets. We saw in one of the previous videos that if we change color from the assets, it will change the color of all the elements made with the same color. The same thing works with the character styles. So, if, for example, I change from the assets this character style, so if I click on it and with the right side of our mouse we go to edit and we change, for example, the font, we can see that the font has changed in all of these character styles, in all of these texts. The same thing works with all of the options to edit the text. So if we change the color, whether it is from here or from here, it will change. The difference between the color saved here into the text and the color saved here is that if I change the color, which is the same from here, if I change the color from the text, it will change the color of all of the texts with the same color. But if I change the color from here, it will change the color of the text and of the elements, which have the same colors. So, if we want to change all of the text made with the same character style, we'll have to change it from the assets, but if we want to change only one text, for example, we can double click on it and edit the text from here. So we can, for example, have another font, and as you can see, it has changed only the character style of this element, so of this text that we have selected. So now that we have seen these tools of the assets, we can go back to our artboard and we can edit this text. Of course, we can use all of these options. This is because, as we have already said many times, the texts are also vector tools into Adobe XD. The difference between the text and the vector shapes is that we can have these options for the text while we do not have these options, of course, with the shapes. So, of course, we can change the font of our text. So, we can choose whichever font we want that we have into Adobe XD. And as we saw, we can also download some free fonts from websites. Of course, we can also change the dimensions of our text. So let's enlarge it. Back again. If we have a text that permits to have different types of options here, like a narrow text, a bold text, we can also have these options. And we can also, let's go a little closer, we can also change the spacing between the characters. So, if we, for example, enlarge this spacing, you can see that it has enlarged the spacing. Of course, we can do also the opposite. If we write -30, for example, you can see that they are now really close. So we can do a lot of experiments. So we can also change the line spacing. So let's put this text on 2 lines and let's change the line spacing. So I will move this text a little lower so that we have more space. So let's use this option. So we can, for example, write 100, and as you can see, they are not as close as they used to be. So we can also change the spacing between the paragraphs. So let's create more paragraphs. For example, we can double click on here and copy and paste this text into the same text box. So Ctrl C, Ctrl V, and now we will do it again, but we will copy and paste them, yes, in the same box, but with a line of difference. So we have now two paragraphs. Now we can choose to make a paragraph with a lot of distance between one another. As you can see, let's go back with Ctrl Z. And now we saw all of these options. Of course, you can align the text to the left, to the center, and to the right. And you can also have an auto width, which means that you can change what was before a text box into an insertion. In fact, when we click on auto width, we will change the text box into an insertion. We can also do the opposite, so we can click on auto height and it is now a text box again. If we click on fix size, we will have this kind of handle that we have already saw. So let's now see these options that we have here. So when we click on these two T with an uppercase, we will change our text and we will have all of our text in an uppercase. If we click into these two T's, we will have all of our text in a lowercase. If we click here, we will have only the initials of each word in capital letters. Also, we can, for example, let's now choose one word only and let's put the text in one line. So we can erase this text and we can go to one line. And now we can click on this word and click on here so that we have a superscript, or also we can make it a subscript. Of course, we can choose to have this text as a superscript and this text as a subscript. Also, let's go back. We can see that we can underline our text and also we can have a line in the center of the text by clicking on here. So we have these options for the text in here. Of course, we can also change the text. Let's do this experiment with this text. So we can change, for example, as the text are vector tools, the border of the text. We can choose to make a border and also we can create a dash with the border. So we can pretty much do with the text everything that we can do with the vector shapes. Of course, we can have an inner shadow, a drop shadow, and we can also control them. We can have a background tool that is usually used with images when we create a mask. So let's now do another experiment with images. So we will create a mask between a text and an image. So let's put our castle image into Adobe XD and let's scale it a little bit. But before we will, for example, go to Object, Path, and Convert to Path so that we can have a path with our text. As we saw on the previous video, we can double click on the handles and create the curves from the control points. So if we double click on the control points, we will create the handle. If we double click again, we will make the handle disappear. So let's double click again. We have the handle. If we click on one of the points of the handle, so if we click with the mouse on one of the points and we click with the keyboard on Alt, we will then break the handle. So we will have two different handles from the same control point. If we have this handle broke into two, we can work from the same control point with two different lines. So we have now our image. Let's scale it a little more. Let's put this text above it. So we can see that the text is behind the picture. We just have to click on the picture and then with the right side of our mouse go to bring forward if we want to leave this image here. If we want to send this picture backward, we can click on send backward. So we will see with the last experiment how we can work with these options, but we will now create a mask. So we will select these two elements and with the right side of our mouse we will click on mask with shape. So we have our image inside of our text. If we double click, we can of course change the image as we did with the vector shape. So let's do another experiment. Let's take our castle image and let's put in front of it a text, for example this text, and as we can see it is behind the picture. So we want to move our image behind, so we will click on send backward. As you can see, the text is still behind, so we can click on send to back. We will now see what is the difference between these options. But before, we will scale this text so that we can see it, and we want now to put a rectangle between the text and between the text and the image. So we can create a rectangle, and of course this rectangle is now above the image and above the text. So how can we put this rectangle between the image and the text? We can select it and click with the right side of our mouse. So when we click on bring to front, it will bring our elements in front of all of the elements. If we click on bring forward, the element will do only a step, let's say a step forward. If we click on send backward, the element will do only a step backward, and if we click on send to back, it will go behind all of the elements. So let's see it now. If we click on send backward, as you can see, sometimes when we have a lot of elements, we will have to click on it for a lot of times, but we can also choose to use the shortcut. So when we click on send backward, it will do a step backward. In fact, this element is now between the text and behind it there is the image. If we click again on send backward, we can see that it will go behind the image. So the same thing with bring forward. It will do only a step. So we'll have to click in some cases a lot of times, but it is now above all of the elements. So let's see what happens when we click on Send to Back. With one click, it is behind all of the elements that we have in this area. And if we click on Bring to Front, it is now with one click above all the elements that we have in this area. So, as we said, we want our element between the text and the image as it is now. And we can use also the smart guides to create a rectangle with the same dimensions of the image. As you can see, it will appear this blue line that will indicate to us that we are in the same line of the image. So we can now play with the blend mode, and also we can play with the opacity. Of course, if we have a white rectangle, there are not a lot of effects, but for example, if we have a rectangle with another color and we play with the opacity, we will create an effect into the image. Of course, we can create an inner shadow, a drop shadow, and we can also create a background blur. So we can enlarge the opacity. Let's, for example, create this rectangle with some curves at the sides, and we can play, for example, with these options. So, for example, here we have a blur. Of course, we can use some of the vector tools also onto the images, so we can have the image as the rectangle, which is now not a rectangle anymore. And we can play with these options when we create something onto Adobe XD. So, for this video, it is all. Thank you for watching this tutorial about Adobe Experience Design. If you have any question, you can ask them in the comments, and I'll invite you to see the other videos into this channel. Thank you again, and we will see each other in the next video about Adobe Experience Design.